I get asked all the time, why so many fishing rods? And, the only way I know how to compare that is if I was in some other kind of business, a construction worker, a plumber, whatever it might be, those guys that do those jobs have a lot of tools. Fishing is how I make my living, competing on tournaments, and rods and reels, that's the tools to get the job done. And that's why we have to have so many. Right here, I've got my KastKing Speed Demon Pro rods. There's 20 technique specific rods in the lineup. So right then and there, if I have one of each of the rods, there's 20 rods in itself. But for me alone, let's say we're fishing 7 or 8 BPT events this year all around the country and all different techniques. So I have to be prepared for every little technique or lure that I could possibly use. And with those 20 rods and reels, I can do that, but I have to have all of them. Even though these rods are amazing, still gonna break rods. It just happens. Sometimes you step on them. Sometimes they get caught under something. You might break a tip or break something. So I've gotta have extras. And it might be that I get to Toledo Bend and I find out they're biting a deep diving crankbait. And then all of a sudden I gotta have 4 or 5 deep crankbait rods rigged and ready to go for that specific event. So it's very important to have all these rods. And then with that being said, if I get 3/4 of these packed, right then and then my whole stock here has been depleted to just probably 2 of extras of each of these rods. So right then and there, you've got to have enough of each of those type of rods to get you through that event. And then let's say if I do break a rod, or in this day and age you get a bunch stolen or something like that, I got to have enough to get me through. Yeah, could I call and order some, but that's going to take some time. So what I like to do, and the way I do it, a lot of guys have rod tubes in their boat. I'm kind of old school. I've got these old Pro Lockers. Mike McClellan's dad makes these things. I can fit about probably 30 or 40 different rods in here. So I'm just going to start going through here. I'm going to pull them out and I'll pack them up in these. I've got the rods that are going in my boat, and then these are going to be the rods that I carry extra on the road for me. So when I get there and I do need a couple extra jerk bait or crankbait or whatever I've got them here and I'm ready to go. So there it is. That's why I carry so many rods. I'm kind of type A. I want to have everything. I want to be just in case. And if I need something, I want to make sure I have it. But as you can see here, now my little rolling rod rack here that we made is still a work in progress. I haven't got around to actually making the nice little cool labels. Right now we're kind of stuck with my painter's tape, but you know what? It gets the job done. And that's something to remember in fishing. Just because you see somebody else do it that way, if it works for you, that's all that matters. Same thing with rods. That's what I always tell people about rods. We try to create this with rods for people as, these are technique specific, but I say that all the time. My most favorite rod for a chatterbait is not the bladed jig rod. It's a great rod, but I love the swim bait rod. So it's kind of the same thing with rods. You've got to do what works for you. This little rod carrier works for me. The rods that I use a ton of. So here, this is a 7.3 jig worm spinning rod. So I don't have a lot of those because it's a rod I don't use a ton in the lineup. It's really good for a bigger wacky worm and all that. Here's some punching rods, a 710 cranking rod. That's always throwing a big crankbait is a big deal. Spinner baits aren't as big as they used to be. Frog rod, the little 6/8 square bill. Now you can see this is a rod that's super versatile for me. I use it for a lot of little different applications. It's the 7.3 casting jig worm rod. That's a rod that I take a lot of because it's a really big one in the lineup that I use a whole lot of. This is an 8-foot swim bait rod, so for really big swim baits, obviously don't use those as much. And then we've got the 610 drop shot. It seems like the sport is always evolving and spinning rods are becoming more and more. The 610 drop shot rod is a rod I use quite a bit of. So this is one side of the wall. We've got the other side over there, and I can definitely show you the other side as well. So we can just roll this thing around, and that's what I love about it. I wish I could say I built this, but I kind of came up with the concept, but luckily I have buddies that are a lot better at building stuff, so I came up with the idea and then built it. But as you can see over here, this is probably a lot of the rods I use a lot more of. This is by far my most favorite rod here. This is the 7.6 swim bait rod. This is the rod I throw most of the bladed jigs on, throw smaller swim baits on it, a lot of top waters, your plopper baits, all that. That's one of my favorites. So here's the 7.3 bladed jig rod. It's a great rod for top waters, for bladed jigs up in close quarters, tight covers, all that. But as you can see, there's just a big variety here. So you don't need this many rods, but this is how many I have to get the job done. Start out with a few and then go from there. So there you have it. That's why I have so many rods, because that's what I need to have to get the job done. Everybody has their own way of doing it. I'm not going to apologize about the way I do it because it works for me, but find out what works for you. Get you as many rods as you need and go out there and have fun.